Paul, can you show me where Amanda stayed when she was here? Can you walk with me over there?
A mother disappears, and no one sees it happen. No struggle, no goodbye, no trace. At first, it seemed like another missing person case, a woman who simply chose to walk away. But her family knew something wasn't right. Amanda Dean was a mother of 4. No matter how difficult life became, she would never abandon her children without a word. Days turned into months, months turned into years, and still, Amanda never came home. Behind the silence, investigators slowly uncovered a disturbing pattern, a troubled relationship, a remote property far from neighbors, and a boyfriend whose story never quite added up. But without a body, without physical proof, the truth stayed buried, until one visit to a rural property changed everything. And what authorities believe happened there would shock even seasoned investigators, because sometimes the most terrifying crimes don't begin with strangers in the dark. They begin with someone you trust. July 11, 2017, started like any other summer day in northern Ohio. The heat hung in the air, families went about their routines, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But by the end of that day, a mother would vanish, setting off a mystery that would haunt her family for years. Amanda Dean, a 32-year-old mother of 4, suddenly stopped answering her phone. At first, it didn't trigger immediate panic. Amanda's life hadn't been easy. She had faced financial struggles, relationship problems, and personal challenges. Sometimes she moved between places or needed time to get herself together. But there was one thing Amanda never did. She never disappeared without telling her family. Her mother, Caroline, quickly sensed something was wrong. Amanda always checked in, always. Even when life was chaotic, she found a way to call, text, or show up. This time, there was only silence. Caroline contacted authorities, reporting her daughter missing. Deputies from the Huron County Sheriff's Office began looking into Amanda's whereabouts, but early information made the situation confusing. Investigators learned Amanda had recently been staying at a domestic violence shelter. Staff members at the facility confirmed she had been safe there and was receiving help. But because adults have the right to leave voluntarily, police initially treated the situation cautiously. Amanda could have simply chosen to move on without telling anyone, but her family insisted something wasn't right. Amanda had 4 sons. No matter what was happening in her personal life, she never went long without talking to them or checking in with relatives. To her family, abandoning contact for weeks, let alone months, was unthinkable. Behind Amanda's unstable living situation was a relationship many close to her worried about. Amanda had been involved with a man named Frederick Reer. Their relationship had been on again, off again for years, and according to those who knew them, it was far from healthy. They met while working at an Olive Garden restaurant years earlier. At first, things seemed normal, but friends and family later described their relationship as toxic, filled with arguments and emotional volatility. Amanda even moved out of state for a time, trying to distance herself from Frederick. But she eventually returned to Ohio, and the relationship resumed. According to family members, the pattern continued. Fights, separation, reconciliation, and more conflict. Still, when Amanda disappeared, Frederick insisted nothing was wrong. He told people Amanda had left on her own, that she was fine, that she needed space. At first, authorities had little reason to challenge that story. Amanda was an adult, and without evidence of a crime, the investigation stalled. Weeks passed, then months, and still Amanda never contacted her family. For Caroline and Amanda's siblings, the silence became unbearable. They pushed investigators to keep looking, convinced Amanda would never willingly disappear from her children's lives. But with no body, no crime scene, and no clear evidence, the case slowly grew cold. Over the next several years, Amanda's family lived in agonizing uncertainty. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went. Her children grew older without knowing where their mother was or why she never came back. Rumors circulated in the small communities around Huron County. Some people believed Amanda simply left to start over. Others suspected something darker had happened. But without proof, the truth remained hidden. Authorities occasionally revisited the case, following leads that never went anywhere. Friends and acquaintances were questioned. Tips were checked. Nothing concrete emerged. Amanda's disappearance became one of those haunting, unsolved cases. the kind that lingers in the background, quietly tormenting families while the rest of the world moves on. But Amanda's loved ones never stopped searching for answers, and slowly, investigators began taking a second look at the people closest to her in the final days before she vanished. One detail kept resurfacing: the cabin. Frederick Reer lived in a rural property in Townsend Township, an isolated area where neighbors were few and privacy was easy to maintain. Amanda had been staying there shortly before she disappeared. The location, surrounded by open land and limited visibility from the road, raised questions. If something had happened there, would anyone have seen it? Would anyone have heard it? For years, that property remained just another unanswered question in Amanda's disappearance, until new investigators took over the case. And when they began digging deeper into Amanda's final known days, disturbing pieces of the puzzle started to surface, pieces that pointed back to the same man many in Amanda's family had suspected from the very beginning. The mystery of Amanda Dean's disappearance was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unravel. By 2022, Amanda Dean had been missing for 5 years. 5 years of birthdays missed, 5 years of unanswered questions, 5 years of her children growing up without their mother. For Amanda's family, hope and heartbreak existed side by side. Some days they believed answers would come. Other days felt like Amanda had simply vanished forever. But law enforcement had not completely forgotten her case. In 2022, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, BCI, officially took over the investigation. Cold cases often receive new life when fresh investigators examine old evidence. New eyes sometimes see what others missed. And in Amanda's case, detectives began retracing every step of her final known days. They interviewed people again, re-examined old statements, checked timelines, looked closer at Amanda's relationships, especially the one that appeared most volatile: her relationship with Frederick Reer. Family members had long believed Frederick played a role in Amanda's disappearance, but belief alone is not enough to make an arrest. Investigators needed proof, and they began finding inconsistencies. One troubling detail involved Amanda's last communications with friends. According to investigators, Amanda had messaged a friend in early July 2017 saying she was tired of her situation and wanted help leaving. She was trying to get away. But shortly after, her tone suddenly changed. Another message appeared, telling the friend not to come pick her up and warning that it wouldn't be good if she tried. To detectives reviewing the case years later, the shift felt suspicious. People trying to escape abusive situations don't usually reverse course so abruptly without pressure. And then Amanda disappeared entirely. No bank activity, no phone records showing travel, no social media posts, nothing. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. Investigators then began focusing more closely on the rural property where Amanda had been staying with Frederick. The cabin sat in a secluded area, few neighbors, long stretches of land, a place where events could go unnoticed, and new information began surfacing. Neighbors reportedly recalled changes to the property shortly after Amanda vanished. Carpet that had once been inside the cabin was suddenly gone. Items were removed. Certain areas appeared cleaned or altered. Nothing on its own proved a crime. But combined, the details began forming a troubling pattern. Still, detectives needed more. And then, in late 2023, something finally shifted. A new lead surfaced, giving investigators probable cause to execute a search warrant at the property. On November 16, 2023, law enforcement officers arrived at the rural home belonging to Frederick Reer's father. Investigators began combing through the land and structures connected to the property. Body camera footage from that day captures tense conversations between officers and family members as they walked through the area. Investigators asked questions about where Amanda had stayed, who lived in certain structures, and what areas she used while she was there. Family members appeared emotional and confused, insisting they liked Amanda and never wanted anything bad to happen to her. But investigators weren't there to argue, they were there to search. And while authorities have never publicly detailed everything discovered during that search, the impact was clear. Because only 3 months later, after nearly 7 years of mystery, Frederick Reer was arrested. For Amanda's family, the moment was bittersweet, relief that someone was finally being held accountable, but also pain, because an arrest suggested the worst possibility had been true all along. Amanda had not simply disappeared, something had happened to her, and investigators now believed Frederick Reer was responsible. The charges were severe: murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, and concealment of a body. Yet even with charges filed, one heartbreaking truth remained. Amanda's body had never been found. Without Without remains, prosecutors faced challenges. No autopsy, no confirmed cause of death, no physical evidence of how Amanda died, but investigators believed they had enough circumstantial evidence to move forward, and as Frederick prepared to face trial, Amanda's family braced themselves for the painful process ahead. They hoped the courtroom would finally reveal what happened in that cabin years earlier. They hoped they would finally learn the truth. But no one could have predicted how the case would ultimately unfold, because just weeks before the trial was set to begin, everything changed again. Frederick Reer's trial was expected to begin in early 2026. For Amanda Dean's family, it meant finally hearing the evidence laid out in open court. For nearly 7 years, they had lived in uncertainty. A trial promised answers, accountability, and perhaps some measure of closure. Prosecutors had prepared their case carefully. Even without Amanda's body, investigators believed they had enough evidence to convince a jury that Frederick was responsible for her death and for covering up what happened afterward. But just weeks before the trial was set to begin, everything shifted. Instead of going before a jury, Frederick Reer accepted a plea deal. The murder charge, which could have resulted in life behind bars, was dropped in exchange for guilty pleas to involuntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. For Amanda's family, the news was devastating. A plea deal meant no trial, no dramatic courtroom reveal, no public presentation of every detail investigators had uncovered, and most painfully, it meant Frederick would avoid a potential life sentence. Still, prosecutors believed the plea was the best option under difficult circumstances. Without a body, proving murder beyond a reasonable doubt can be extremely challenging. Defense attorneys often argue alternative scenarios, suggesting the victim could have died accidentally or under unknown conditions. A plea deal guaranteed prison time, a trial carried risk. So on January 5, 2026, Frederick Reer stood before the judge for sentencing, and for the first time, prosecutors laid out the case details publicly. They confirmed what Amanda's family had long feared: Amanda Dean was dead. According to investigators, Amanda died in early July 2017 inside the rural cabin where she had been living with Frederick. Prosecutors told the court that after her death, Frederick took deliberate steps to make sure no one would ever find her remains. They described how Amanda's body was dismembered and removed from the property. They spoke about evidence showing that a mattress inside the cabin had been burned, allegedly the same mattress Amanda died on. Investigators also described cleanup efforts involving towels, rags, and sheets used to remove blood evidence from the scene. Afterward, Amanda's remains were taken away and hidden in a location that, even after years of searching, authorities still could not locate. The courtroom grew heavy as these details were shared. Amanda's mother, siblings, and children sat only feet away from the man prosecutors said was responsible. And as painful as the evidence was, the most heartbreaking moments came when Amanda's children spoke. One by one, they addressed the court. Some struggled to find words, others spoke through tears. One son described growing up believing his mother had simply abandoned them, only later learning she never chose to leave. Another spoke of never again being able to ask his mother for advice or comfort. No graduation celebration, no wedding attendance, no chance to introduce her to future grandchildren. The loss was permanent. Amanda's mother addressed Frederick directly, asking how someone could destroy the life of a person they once claimed to love. She described the agony of knowing her daughter's body had been desecrated and hidden, denying the family even the ability to bury her properly. The emotional weight in the courtroom was overwhelming. Throughout it all, Frederick Reer remained mostly silent. His defense attorney argued there was no evidence Amanda's death had been premeditated murder, emphasizing that the plea agreement reflected uncertainty about exactly how she died. Still, for Amanda's family, the legal distinctions meant little. Their daughter, sister, and mother was gone, and the man responsible would never face a jury trial for murder. Finally, the judge delivered the sentence: 14 years in prison. It was the maximum allowed under the plea agreement, but far less than a life sentence. For Amanda's family, the punishment felt painfully insufficient. No number of years could bring Amanda back. No sentence could erase the years her children lived without answers. And one cruel reality remained unchanged. Amanda Dean's body was still missing. Even after Frederick cooperated with investigators following his plea, authorities were unable to recover her remains. Her family still had no grave to visit, no final goodbye, just memories, and questions that may never fully be answered. As Frederick was led away to begin serving his sentence, Amanda's loved ones were left to continue living with the consequences of a tragedy that began nearly a decade earlier, a disappearance that was never random, a relationship that turned deadly, a truth that took years to uncover. But even now, one haunting question remains. If Amanda's body is never found, will her family ever truly have closure? When the courtroom emptied after sentencing, Amanda Dean's family walked out carrying emotions too heavy for words. There was relief, The man responsible would spend years behind bars, but relief did not equal peace because Amanda was still missing. No funeral, no gravesite, no place to sit quietly and say goodbye. Her children could not visit their mother's resting place. Her mother could not bring flowers. Her sisters could not grieve beside a headstone. Instead, Amanda existed only in memories and photographs. And in the painful silence left behind, cases without recovered remains leave families suspended between grief and uncertainty. Even when guilt is established, closure often feels incomplete. Amanda's children, now growing into adulthood, must carry questions that may never fully be answered. What exactly happened in those final moments? Did she suffer? Was she afraid? Did she try to escape? These questions linger long after court proceedings end. Investigators admitted during sentencing that extensive searches were conducted over several years. Rural properties, wooded areas, fields, and potential disposal sites were examined. Tips were followed, leads investigated, yet Amanda's remains have never been located, and Frederick Reer has not provided information leading to their recovery. Some investigators believe fear or shame keeps offenders silent even after sentencing. Others think memories fade, locations change, or evidence is lost with time. Whatever the reason, Amanda's final resting place remains unknown, and that reality keeps the wound open for her family. Looking back, warning signs had existed for years. Friends described Amanda's relationship with Frederick as volatile. Arguments were common. Control and manipulation reportedly followed her attempts to leave. Amanda herself reportedly sought help in escaping the relationship. She tried reaching out to friends and family, but abusive dynamics are complex. Leaving is often the most dangerous moment for victims. Emotional ties, financial dependence, fear, and isolation trap many in cycles of violence. Amanda's case reflects a tragic pattern seen too often: a partner trying to leave, a controlling relationship escalating, and a situation ending in irreversible violence. The rural cabin that once held Amanda now stands as a grim reminder of what investigators believe happened there. To outsiders, it looked ordinary, a quiet place far from the noise of the city, but sometimes the most horrifying events happen in the most isolated places, where no one hears the arguments, where cries go unnoticed, where someone can disappear without immediate suspicion. And for years, Amanda Dean was simply listed as missing. No one knew her story would eventually reveal something far darker. Today, Frederick Reer remains incarcerated in Ohio, serving his 14-year sentence. His earliest possible release date is February 2038. By then, Amanda's children will be adults with lives of their own, but they will continue living with the absence their mother left behind. The birthdays missed, the phone calls that never came, the milestones she never witnessed. Amanda's story is not just about crime, it is about loss, about the ripple effect violence leaves on families and communities, and about how long justice can take, sometimes nearly a decade. Yet even now, investigators say the case remains open in one crucial way. If new information emerges, searches could resume. Authorities still hope Amanda's remains may one day be found. And until that day, Amanda's family continues waiting for the chance to finally bring her home, to lay her to rest, to say goodbye in a way they never could. Because justice in court does not always mean justice in the heart. Sometimes closure remains just out of reach. And Amanda Dean's story serves as a haunting reminder that behind every headline is a family still living the aftermath, still healing, still searching, still hoping. Some stories end with answers, others end with questions that linger long after the cameras stop rolling. If you believe Amanda's story deserves to be remembered, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines. Because sometimes, remembering the victims is the only justice left, and we'll see you in the next case.